Knowing how to exploit ports alongside the protocol they are using is an everyday activity for an ethical hacker. In this video, I'm going to cover the most basic ports and protocols that you will see commonly every day. I'll be quick so we don't waste any time. Think of a port as a channel for communication. Each port corresponds to a specific service or protocol. Protocols, like HTTP or DNS, define how data is exchanged over these ports. For example, HTTP typically uses port 80, while HTTPS uses port 443 for secure communication. Some of the most common ports include port 22, which is for SSH, port 80 for HTTP, port 443 for HTTPS, port 53, which is for DNS, and port 21, which is for FTP. These are just a few, but there are 65,535 TCP and UDP ports available. That's a lot of doors, and not all of them are locked. Since these are very common protocols that you'll use every day as an ethical hacker, let's dive into them a bit more. Port 22, which is for SSH, also known as Secure Shell. SSH is used for secure remote login and command execution between computers. It encrypts traffic, ensuring that sensitive data like login credentials is protected. SSH is commonly used by system administrators and hackers alike for managing systems over a network. Port 80, HTTP, also known as Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP is the foundation of web traffic. It is used to transfer data between a web server and a browser in plain text. Since it lacks encryption, data sent over HTTP can be intercepted and read, making it a less secure option compared to HTTPS. Have you ever been hit with a "this connection is not secure" error while browsing? This means that the website is using HTTP, and any data you send to it is vulnerable to being read. Port 443, HTTPS, also known as the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. HTTPS is a secure version of HTTP. It uses SSL/TLS encryption to protect the data being transmitted between the client and the server, ensuring confidentiality and integrity. It's the standard for secure online transactions and web browsing. To wrap your head around how this works, do some research on TLS certificates and public key infrastructure, which is beyond the scope of this video. Port 53, DNS, also known as the Domain Name System. DNS translates human-readable domain names like duckduckgo.com into IP addresses that computers use to communicate. It's a critical service for the internet, but it can be exploited for attacks like DNS spoofing or amplification in DDoS attacks. Port 21, FTP, or the File Transfer Protocol. FTP is used for transferring files between systems over a network. It is an older protocol that often transmits data, including credentials, in plain text. Unless secured with tools like FTPS or SFTP, it's vulnerable to interception and exploitation. You'll see this one quite a bit in your experience as an ethical hacker. These ports represent critical services that are used daily across the internet, but they also pose risks if left unopened or misconfigured. Understanding their purpose and how they can be secured is key for both ethical hackers and system administrators. You will come across these often, but there are plenty more that you will learn to exploit. Hackers start by scanning for open ports using tools like Nmap. An open port is like a window left ajar. It's an invitation to take a closer look. Hackers typically look for a couple of things, the first being misconfigured services. Imagine an SSH server on port 22 with weak or default credentials. This is a prime target for brute force attacks, meaning we can take lists of usernames and passwords and try every combination until we're in. Next up is Unpatched Software. Older software versions have known vulnerabilities. For example, an outdated HTTP server might expose vulnerabilities like remote code execution, or RCE as we call it. These are often an easy way to establish a reverse shell to a device, meaning you can move your way up to owning a machine. We also like to check for unusual open ports. Sometimes services run on non-standard ports, like an admin panel to a website hiding on port 8080. When a port is open, it reveals information about the system. Even if the service is secure, the version information could give clues to a hacker. For example, a banner on an FTP server might reveal that it's an old version, opening the door to exploitation. Once a hacker gains access, they can escalate privileges, exfiltrate data, or pivot to other parts of the network. You can learn about this in part 1 of my privilege escalation video. A real-world example is the SMB vulnerability exploited by EternalBlue on port 445, which led to massive ransomware attacks like WannaCry. So, how do you defend against this? Let me give you 3 tips to secure your ports. Number 1. Close unnecessary ports. If you're not using a service, close its port, always. Every unnecessary open port is an unnecessary risk. You can scan your own machines with Nmap to find any hidden ports open on your most important devices. Number 2. Use firewalls. Firewalls block unauthorized traffic. Tools like UFW and IP tables on Linux or the Windows Defender firewall are your first line of defense. If you're looking for a dedicated firewall that you can put in front of your entire network, look into IPFire and try it out as a project. If you want to add a custom firewall to Windows, try Portmaster, which is great for increasing your privacy. Number 3. Regular scans. Scan your own systems regularly with tools like Nmap, or try out OpenVAS if you want to experiment with a free vulnerability scanner. Use this to find and fix vulnerabilities on your network before attackers do. For ethical hackers, understanding ports and protocols is critical. Open ports can be entry points during penetration tests, but they're also key to spotting vulnerabilities before malicious actors do. Remember, knowledge is power. Ports are power, and as Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, subscribe, and keep hacking. I'll see you in the next one.